Henny, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. You had to wait for me to set everything up as we test out the new studios. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
So today we have Henny Foster, psychologist, father of 2 girls. So what initially, let's start, at the beginning. What got you interested in psychology?
I've always been interested in people. But when I was 12 years old, my mom passed away. She had cancer. And at the age of 12, I realized that I would like to help people that are going through a difficult time. And since then, went to high school and then thought, psychology is something that I'd really like to get into. And I was very, very blessed that could go to varsity and go the whole route. So I've been doing this now for 22 years. Educational psychologist, so work a lot with children, teenagers, families, adults. But I really like people and try to figure out how their minds work.
It's actually, it's sort of related, but I was listening to a podcast this morning on the way here, and the guy was, and I'd like to know your thoughts just while it's fresh in my mind, is he was saying how in the real world, interacting with people are genuinely quite nice. But then on social media, or his exact example was on Twitter, are terrible. It's almost like their shadow self. But I was thinking, is it maybe not actually people are showing more of their true selves on the Twitter or on social media where they have that anonymity of being able to hide behind the screen? But that's actually maybe more who they are than the fake facade they maybe put on in person to, obviously not everyone, but I think to a large degree, people in every or most social interactions are putting on their best self, which actually might not be their true self.
I do think I agree with you. I think having normal interaction with people are quite nice, but I think it's easier to self-regulate when you and I are talking, because what you think of me and what other people think of me is important. So I know that if I had to give you my opinion about something that you said or something that you did, and I had to give it very bluntly, then the possibility of you getting angry back at me or even hitting me is quite real. Where on Twitter, on Instagram, on all these social media platforms, I can say something, but there's no immediate feedback. So I can say what I want. So self-regulation goes a bit out of the window on social media, because I can tell you what I think. You're sitting very far away from me. I've maybe never met you in my life before. So what you actually think of me is not that important in terms of that. So I think, especially on Twitter, it's people flush out their brains and they just spill their guts. But I don't know if that's their true self or actually just all these built up emotions that they have, and they're thinking this is an outlet for me to speak my mind. It's always interesting for me when I work with some clients, and especially in a family setup where parents are maybe divorced and things, and the children tell me something about mom or dad. And then I meet mom and dad one day, or I speak to them over the phone or via email, and the interaction, they can be quite assertive and even aggressive at times. And then I meet them in person, and then they're actually very nice people, because now all of a sudden I'm there in the room with them and they have to react in a certain way.
Yeah, I think people definitely, and if you compare, social media to face-to-face interaction, it's social media, you can say certain things, you can get away with saying certain things because, there's the lack of the person you're speaking to's ability to confront you physically or in any, face-to-face manner. So I think self-preservation in society maybe a lot makes us or forces us to almost, be better versions of ourselves in person. But if you look at it, evolutionarily, to survive, you want to be, working well with the people that you're interacting with. So I think genetically it's ingrained in us to be nicer actually, and to be better people face to face. Whereas on social media, it's such a new landscape that, maybe evolutionary, we don't really understand the ramifications thereof. And actually, it's very interesting because I saw a post on social media where it's when you bring up your childhood trauma to your parents and then the mom got really upset or whatever in the meme. And I'm sure it must be interesting for you because also you just mentioned interacting then with the parents of the kids that you may be working with but I was a great mom. I was a great dad. There's no childhood trauma. Like, what's wrong with my child?
I always say to parents, we always have to realize that as parents, we are always going to give our child a childhood wound in some or other way, whether it is being too strict or not having time for them or whatever it may be. And when I make peace with the fact that I'm always going to give my child a childhood wound, because all of us have got wounds from our childhood, it actually just gives me grace as a parent just to be okay with that. Because I think as parents, it's one of the only jobs in the world where we've never been to school or varsity or anything to qualify for it, and there's no manual to say in this situation do the following. So we just fly by the skin of our pants and we do as best as we can based on how we were brought up. And it's interesting, the whole social media aspect of that is I grew up BC, before cell phones. So my children are exposed to social media, and I don't always know what advice to give them because I didn't grow up with it. In my days, if I wanted to chat to a friend, I would have to ask my dad, may I use the phone? And he'll say to me, yes, you may, but only 2 minutes because it's very expensive. Then I would have to phone, and then 10 to 1, his mom answers, and I have to make small talk. And by the time I get to talk to him, my mom or dad shouting in the background and saying, get off the phone. But now on WhatsApp, the teenagers are just spilling the guts to each other. And what they don't always realize is that stuff that you post on social media always stays there. So if I don't like you, I can say to you in your face, and you can tell other people what I said, but there's no real evidence. Where on social media, even if I send you a one view message on WhatsApp, you can take a screenshot of it, and it's always there. And I don't think our children and the teenagers and the youth today realize that on social media, you've actually got to be more careful of what you're saying because there's no privacy. When I grew up, there was much more privacy. I went to friends' houses and I had to be back by supper time, but my mom and dad never knew where we were and what we were actually doing. But now everyone's got their phones. Parents are tracking their children and seeing what they're doing. Their friends are posting stuff of them on social media. So it's actually the children are growing up in a world where there's no privacy for them.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you mentioned or like a particular message being able to be saved, a photo, whatever. Even now in corporate climates where if you're part of a group where maybe something racial happens and you don't verbally reply saying, I do not agree with this, just by being in the group, there's implications on you. You can just see the message, completely ignore it, maybe definitely not agree with it, but just by not leaving the group or saying on there, I do not agree, you then implicated in that as well. And that's, uncharted territory for everyone. And especially the kids of today, fortunately, I think, or you said your daughter's 14 now. What in that?
15 and 17, yeah.
15 and 17. Obviously, that's, your oldest is 11 years younger than me. I grew up in like grade 8-ish when Instagram and that first came into fruition, whereas she's pretty much almost been alive. Her cell phone life or internet life has been exposed to social media. So for me, I think maybe like my generation age gap is like the last people to have not had social media and then had social media that obviously were born, I would say, after probably 1990. obviously your generation, my parents' generation, that older generation also obviously were exposed to not having social media. But I think anyone under 30 now, it's probably like 20 to 30 where you were the only people that didn't have social media growing up. And it is uncharted territory. And especially because, as you mentioned, you're an adult, you maybe have some advice, but then it's also, do I have actually the correct advice because I wasn't exposed to the social media when I was a kid? So how do you work that, as a parent, as someone watching this with kids, do I give them the iPad at dinner because they can't sit still? Do I do this? And there is, as you mentioned, no correct 100% guided way on how to parent. While you answer that, sorry, I'm just going to get this water so you can continue.
No problem. I always say to parents, rather than safe than sorry, and I'm not always the favorite parent in my daughter's social group, because I only allowed my daughter to get Instagram when she was 16, and they only got a cell phone, my old cell phone that they were borrowing when they went to high school because they needed for high school. So in primary school, where quite a few of their friends had phones and had WhatsApp and all of that, I just said no. It's a big no, because if you look at how the brain develops, is that the part of the brain that is visually stimulated is fully developed by the age of 8, but the logical, rational side of my brain is only fully developed by the age of 23 to 26. So the part of my brain that is looking at Instagram, on social media, gaming, whatever, is firing on all 6 cylinders. But the part of the brain that says, maybe I shouldn't be looking at this, or maybe I shouldn't say this, hasn't kicked in yet. So I think children are, apart from what they're posting themselves, I think they are being exposed to things which they emotionally and sometimes even intellectually aren't ready to cope with. And that makes it very difficult. And I mean, if you look at quite a few of the experts on social media, even people, Bill Gates, the techno whizzes of the world, they are also not allowing their children at a young age to be exposed to too much of it.
I mean, the richest people in the world, that own the Microsofts and the Facebooks were like, actually, maybe it's not the best idea to have your kids on social media. The creators, essentially, of social media don't want their kids on social media, which gives people an answer on what to do with their children.
And I think as parents, because we didn't grow up with it, it's difficult for us to know what to do or what not to do. And I think COVID made things even more difficult for parents, because we had to go online and work online, and our children were bored. So what did we say? We said, here's a phone, here's the TV, here's the laptop, keep yourselves busy. And that has caused so much other implications, because in COVID they were on the screen 24/7, and now I'm trying to take that back. And we all know that screens and technology and social media releases dopamine, and we get addicted to dopamine. So now we've actually made our children addicts to dopamine, and now I'm taking the drug away.
I'm a dopamine fiend, if I'm dead honest. Like, I will, let's say, the moment I get in my car, I'll put on a podcast, or even music. Music can also release dopamine. So, it's always that stimulation of some sort, where it's, okay, in my car, put on a podcast. Okay, cool. Got home while I'm feeding my dogs, listen to the rest of the podcast. Okay, now I'm cooking dinner. Maybe I feel like music. Let me put on some music, or let me leave the TV on in the background so there's some sort of noise. So, and all of that is still stimulating dopamine. And I find, which I like to do, is I'll usually, let's say I'm really enjoying a TV show. Once it stops being enjoyable, that's essentially my dopamine, like no longer receiving any dopamine, and there's no more enjoyment from it. So I'm like, okay, let's dial it back. I was going through a stage where while I was working, I would always watch and listen to a podcast like on the side. And eventually I wasn't taking anything in. I wasn't enjoying it, because there was just this constant stimulus and noise that I actually had to stop to almost be able to have that dopamine reset. And, we see it with kids. And I think, I don't know what your perspective or views would be, is, having that dopamine, constantly getting that dopamine, could that lead then to a desire for other certain chemicals in your brain? For me, it's that dopamine's cool. Let me maybe get some serotonin from human interaction. Let me maybe do all of these different things. But that dopamine, I think, in society is the easiest access for all of us. Right now, open our phone and get some.
No, definitely. And I think all of us as a society is addicted to dopamine. And if you just go into a doctor's waiting room, everyone's on their phone. I mean, I try to manage my own habits, social media, but I find in the evenings after I've had a long day, seen many people, the only thing I want to do is either space in front of the TV or be on Instagram mindlessly scrolling through it. And then I want to implement to my children certain rules in terms of how to use technology, but I'm not doing it. But it's not just technology. I mean, exercise also releases dopamine. People can get addicted to exercise. And
I'm 100% addicted to exercise. I can 100% admit that. And I was listening, sorry to derail a little bit, but it made amazing sense to me was, if I was listening to a podcast where this guy was an actual physical drug addict. And he said he replaced his addiction to drugs with his addiction to exercise. And I know 100% I do that is I'm addicted to seeing something through an action. So I'm addicted to exercise, and when I don't exercise, I feel off balance. And, 2 days without exercise or going to the gym, you go through a similar withdrawal than the anxiety of maybe not having your phone with you.
That is, it's, and I think it all comes back to balance, because exercising is very healthy and it's very good. But if I'm doing that the whole day, constantly, but I don't have a balance in my life, it's also not healthy. And it's interesting. I'm not an expert, but I've been doing a bit of research in terms of eating disorders and exercise, is that people who may have had eating disorders in the past are now eating well, but they're compensating by exercising. And they are doing these ultra marathons. And if they don't run 20 kilometers a day, then I can't have the hamburger tonight. So it's this whole thing, and it comes back to balance. And I think our whole world is so driven by stimulus that balance is very difficult. When I grew up, the motto was don't just stand there, do something. And I think these days the motto must actually be don't just do something, stand there and be still, because to get back to balance we need quiet, we need stillness. When one of the best gifts that we can give to our children is the gift of boredom. When we take away all stimulus, because then they start becoming creative. But now all children are walking around with phones in their hands, so the creative part of their brain is not developing the way it should be, because they're on board. I remember as a child, I would moan to my mom and say, but I'm bored. Then she said, well, find something to do. Then I said, but there's nothing to do. Then she says, I don't care. Do something. And that's when you started inventing games and started drawing. Or looking for trouble, or jumping off the roofs, or whatever it was. But children these days, the majority of children these days don't want to go outside and climb trees because that's boring. I can sit in front of the tablet, the laptop, the phone, the TV, and get all that stimulation.
And I think it's difficult and scary, because I often find myself more living my life on social media than living life. I'm on this amazing holiday. Why am I posting about this holiday? Why can't I just live the holiday? Why do I need anyone to see that I am on this trip? Why, often I see people at a really nice restaurant posting that at the restaurant, or posting this or that. And I'm just thinking to myself, and especially when I do it, it's why do I feel the need to have people knowing what I'm doing? It doesn't take away the beauty of. There's a quote or whatever exactly it is. It's the beauty. The picture is as beautiful. I'm going to completely paraphrase it, but the picture is as beautiful if no one sees it or if everyone sees it. The beauty is the picture. So being on the vacation and being there is as beautiful, irrespective of how nice the photo was that you took. Like no one actually has to see that photo. Why do you think as a society we feel this need to show the world, compare or whatever online about our lives and try actually make it look better on social media?
Because all of us want to be noticed, all of us want to be wanted, and all of us want to feel valued. Social media makes it very easy to be noticed. And coming back to your point earlier is if I spill my guts on Twitter and give my opinion, whether it's right or wrong, at least I'm going to get a reaction. If I just post a very, very nice quote on Twitter, no one likes it, no one replies to it. But when I put something out there that's a bit on the edge or a bit controversial, then all of a sudden people reply. So why must I reply with the nice things when I can be more controversial and get reaction? Because
if I look at my dog, it's exactly the same, because when he jumps on me, he gets more of a reaction of no, stop, don't jump on me. As opposed to if he's just greeting me nicely, sitting still at the door, he would get a reaction, but less of an emotional outburst. Whereas the dog's like, okay, what can I do to generate the most amount of noise or the most amount of attention towards me? And that's be negative. And that's why people have like the OnlyFans and, because it generates more interest.
Definitely. And I mean, that's, I say to parents, children want attention. So if they're not getting positive attention, they're going to look for negative attention. Us as adults as well. And I think that's where it makes it so difficult in the corporate environment. If you've got a employee working for you that's doing their job, doing more than what's required of them, the manager leaves them alone because they're doing. But the manager spends so much more time on the employee that doesn't do the job or doesn't send the email, or whatever. And then in the end, the high-functioning employees actually consciously, subconsciously says, well, why am I putting in all this effort? I'm getting no attention. And that makes it difficult. In families, the child who's the most challenging gets the most attention. But the child that's performing well and doing what they should be doing is at a stage says, but why am I the well-behaved one? My mom and dad don't even notice. And that's in society, social media has made it easy for me to get attention because I can then be controversial or be badly behaved.
And I think it works both ways, because the child that gets the attention now, okay, I can still get more attention. And then the kid that didn't get the attention is like, okay, cool, finally I can get some attention. So both children potentially could then seek that attention online. So it's not like one choosing the one direction. It's almost potentially both.
Yes, definitely. And if I'm not getting the attention from my parents or from my people in my group, then I can look for it online and I can look for it on social media. What I always find ironic is I've seen clients who come to me for marriage counseling and they walk in there and then they are fighting and they want to kill each other. And then 3 days later, they post online about how much they love each other and that the best things ever happened to them. And they're going on this trip and they bought the new car. And I'm thinking, well, 3 days ago you wanted to kill each other, but now. So I think, and I saw a TV series. I can't remember which one it was, where there was this social media influencer. And they were showing how in front of the camera, him and his girlfriend were taking all these beautiful photos and they were getting the sponsorships and. But as soon as the phone was put down, they were horrible to each other. So I always say social media is not real, because I can post just a piece of my life or a piece of something, and that looks like reality. if you take the studio, this part of the room is very nice. That part's also nice, but it's not as nice.
Yeah.
So what does this room look like? From the camera side, it looks very nice. But if you look at the whole room, it's not
100%.
completely. Yeah.
And would you say that positive attention that, parents need to give their children, what does that look like? Because I don't think that it should be like participation awards, but then also you don't want them to think that you aren't at least aware of the efforts maybe. Like, what is the right amount of attention to give kids, and especially in today's world of things like participation trophies and all of that?
I think it's difficult for parents because you have to take your child's personality and character into account. I say to parents, if we look at things like tests and exams, it's important to reward the effort, not the outcome. Because I always say what I find unfair about prize givings at school is the kid who in primary school gets the 80s and 90s and gets the awards. 10 to 1 is the kid that actually sits in the class and just by listening gets the 80s and 90s. But the kid that gets the 50s or 60s has to really study hard to get that. So is prize giving really fair? Because just by sitting in class, one kid gets 80 and another kid really has to put in the hours to get 50%. And
the 50% is actually more deserving of an award.
Exactly. But it makes it difficult in society because you don't just want to have, you're right for rugby practice, here's an award for you. It makes it difficult.
Yeah, I think because the real world is going to show them that life doesn't work like that.
Exactly. And but as parents, I think attention is about time, not. And I don't mean your quantity of time, I mean quality of time. Do we, as a society, as a family, do we sit down at the dinner table and have dinner together? Or are we all on our phones? Do we, over the weekend, at least try and spend some time together as a family, actually interacting and looking each other in the eye and connecting? And I think that attention, it's always amazing for me how much healthier families are once they've been on holiday, especially on holiday where there's no Wi-Fi signal. Because now you've gone out camping, there's no Wi-Fi signal, and now you actually have to get on with each other.
You're forced to connect.
I know someone who says that when they go on holiday and there's no Wi-Fi, he has to talk to his wife, and then he actually finds out she's quite nice. But I think in society where we are so rushed and so busy and we're online the whole time, we don't connect. And then we go on holiday, and then you either find you like the person or you don't like the person. I found in COVID many marriages did not survive COVID because prior to COVID, they saw each other maybe 2 hours of the day. The rest of the time they were at work and colleagues. Now, when COVID happened, they had to spend 24/7 together, and there wasn't alcohol, so they had to be sober around each other, and they actually discovered, I don't like you. But their marriage lasted because they saw each other for 2 hours, and now all of a sudden they realized that they actually didn't like each other.
And on the topic of, parents and father figures, mothers, I would say definitely actually in today's society, there seems to be this narrative of not going to those standards of, the family dynamic. And, yes, women, if they want to pursue a career, great. But then, okay, understand, if you do pursue a career, you are now 35. Yes, you've got an amazing job. And yes, you're being paid what you deserve. But then also to now go be a mother, it's very difficult because you've got this full-time job. You've got these responsibilities at work. Your kid, your older parent now, all of these things where it's, let's do that. Society is pushing, women must do that. Women must do that. And then maybe also the aspect of the father not being present, or maybe just both parents not being present with the child because they're both at work. How is that have you seen, like with the people that you've worked with, how is that dynamic with maybe the mother and the father figure away from home?
I've seen, well, the big challenge is that I don't think as parents growing up, we had good role models for the times we are living in now. I think when I was younger, the majority of moms weren't working, or if they were working, they would have a half-day job. Now, I know very few households that can financially survive on just one salary. So mom and dad are working. But now mom feels guilty because she's comparing herself to her mom that used to be there full-time and would be at the netball and the soccer practice and bring the snacks and now she's feeling guilty because she can't do that. So she tries to overcompensate. As a father, my mom didn't work, so my dad would arrive at home in the evening and the supper would be ready. Our homework was done. Everything was nice at home, and he was a good dad, but he wasn't as involved. Now mom and dad are working, and our dads all of a sudden have to start getting more involved, but we didn't have a role model of how that looks like. So I think everyone at this stage is just trying to find out how it works. And I think as parents, that makes it difficult because very often we are just on autopilot, but we don't actually sit down and say, okay, but let's think about this. How are we going to approach this? What are we going to do to work together as a team? And that makes it difficult. And I think because we as a society are so busy, and the screens have become good babysitters, our children don't have good role models. And I'm seeing it a lot with teenagers, is that the father figure is absent because dad is either working very hard or when he is at home, he's not present, or many children are growing up in a household where there's no dad. And there's a big correlation between academic achievement, emotional stability, performance on the sports field, friendships, in terms of whether the dad's involved or not. And by involved, I don't mean having to be there every night doing the homework, but just being there. I think it's very, very important for children to have that male role model. When I did my internship many years ago at a school, I remember in the winter one day walking into the grade 1 class, and everyone was wearing ties, and the one little boy's tie was sitting askew. And I said to him, "Let me just help you with the tie," and I straightened the tie. When I looked up, all 15 of the other boys in the class had pulled their ties skew because they just wanted attention from a man. And I think that's so important. And I think with feminism that has come out, I think as men, we very often feel undervalued because we're not quite sure what we're allowed to do or not allowed to do. And our children need to have healthy male role models in their lives.
I mean, I have been very fortunate with having involved dad, and more so as I've gotten older. It's actually, every Saturday I'm cycling for, several hours with my dad, which is really cool. And seeing that male interaction and having that male interaction and fortunately, I'm obviously in a position where he is a good role model for me, but he's also no one's perfect. So there's nice things to see where I'm like, okay, maybe I don't agree with that, or I don't agree how you handled that, or I don't agree with maybe a comment that he made to my mom or whatever. And then it helps me. So it's also not just the positive things that your male role model is showing you. It's also in general, just maybe a mistake that they make. And then it helps you like, okay, maybe I don't want to be like that. I don't want to become that version. I love these traits about him. Cool, let me take those. Okay, maybe this one, not so much. Let me, times are different. Let's do this slightly different. And so, it's the male role model there, not just them being a strong household figure, whatever. It's also their mistakes and their issues and their problems that you can then learn from and obviously try not to emulate.
And we as parents and as adults, we are all examples, whether it's a good example or a bad example. And I think what makes it difficult is when you place people on pedestals. The day that you realize, but they're not perfect, it makes it very difficult. And I think when we look at personality development as a young child, up to the age of 3 or 4, you believe your parents are perfect. They're the most beautiful. They're the strongest. Their food's the nicest. And then at the age of 4, you have your first big fight with your parents. And then you pack your bag and you want to go and stay with gran or grandfather. And that's where you start, when there's healthy development, then you understand that every person has got good and bad parts. But where there's unhealthy development, the people grow up believing people are either all good or all bad. And then they start talking about splitting. So in other words, when you and I are getting on well, I believe everything about you is good. But the moment we disagree about something, then I split. Then I believe you're just bad. And that is an important part for us to realize that everyone's got good traits and everyone's got not such great traits. And as a child, I can take things from my dad, from the way my mom raised me, and think, okay, as you said, I want to be like that, but that part I want to do differently.
And it's difficult maybe for parents to see and hear, you kind of touched on it earlier, the things that maybe the kids don't agree with the parents, the certain decisions or attributes that they may have. And it's fascinating because I think the older you get and the more discovery and, journey I've tried to make in understanding myself, the more, I don't want to say flaws I've seen in people older than me, but I grew up because I had a household where everything was pretty orderly, things were together. I thought parents and adults in general had their lives together and had their mental health in order and all of these things. And then the older you get, the more you're exposed to adults in general. You're like, okay, everyone is battling with some sort of issue to some degree. There's no perfect person that has completely reformed their health and has a positive self-image or a view on the world or whatever. Like everyone's got some sort of thing that's in some degree an issue for them. And then when you get older, you start to realize that and you see that. And then I think it also, for me at least, it made me love my parents more because I was like, I'm 28. My mom was 25 when she had me. So at 28, could I have a 3-year-old? The way I am in my head, I can't see myself having a 3-year-old, then it puts in perspective like, okay, she was a great mom for being able to have a child like this at that age, because 28, I don't think I could.
Yeah, it's I think the older you get, the more you appreciate your parents. I say to parents, in order to make your lives easier, the day your child becomes a teenager, if you just acknowledge that you may be the most stupid thing on 2 legs, it's going to make your life easier, because your child will very seldom agree with you, because it's mom and dad. They're not cool. What do they actually know? And I think the older you get, when the logical, rational side of your brain gets developed properly, at the age of 24, you realize, but actually my mom and dad were right. Actually, my mom and dad did a remarkably good job for the circumstances they were under. And I think as teenagers, we believe mom and dad know nothing. They're the most conservative. They're the strictest. And then at a stage when we look back, we realize that it was good. I say to parents, if at the age of 18, when your child is 18 and you've never had them say to you, I want to move out, or
I hate you.
I hate you, then you haven't actually done a good job.
You haven't parented enough.
You haven't parented enough, because if if they say to you, I hate you, it means you're doing something right because they don't like what you're doing.
Yeah, if they get away with everything, then maybe you need to put the foot down, be a little bit more strict.
Exactly. So as parents, I think we also have to cut ourselves some slack and be gracious to ourselves, because we are all just trying to cope and do a good job. And what you said just now is, I think very often we are much more harder on ourselves than we are on other people, because everyone else's lives look good, especially on social media. So when I compare myself to other fathers, when I compare myself to other men my age, I'm much harder on myself because I lost it once again. I was irritable. I was angry. I didn't get to the gym. I ate the chocolate. I drank the beer I shouldn't have. And. But because when I look at other people, it looks like their lives are perfect and they're making the right choices.
But there they are having the exact same thoughts as you.
Exactly. So once we acknowledge and realize that everyone makes mistakes and everyone's not perfect, I think it gives us the opportunity to be more gracious with ourselves. But that's very difficult.
Yeah, I think, and because I've always tried to do in my adult life everything to be the best. So if since I started running, I was like, okay, that means if I started running, I need to do marathons. I need to do it at maybe not like the fastest, but I need to do it at the top 1% of the world, be doing the furthest distances that most people wouldn't attempt. If I start a business, okay, it needs to be a super successful business. And then you put this pressure on yourself to be a certain way. And it's fascinating because I think at the end of the day, everyone's constantly putting pressure on themselves. Even the person that maybe isn't trying to have a massive business or have lots of a certain body at the gym or whatever, there's still people that are putting pressure on themselves. I used to look at people that would appear more complacent, let's say, than I was. And I was like, flip, I just wish I could relax a little bit and not have to do everything so well. And then you see them, but then there's certain other traits that are maybe things that you don't want. But those are the traits because of the complacency, or those are the life experiences. So, in life, there's decisions that you make. So the decisions of me wanting to always perform at my best in everything I do are then me having high expectations and never living up to those standards, and then maybe being disappointed in myself. Whereas the person that's complacent is then maybe disappointed in themselves because nothing they have or have experienced or achieved compares to anyone else. So then they're still disappointed in themselves. So I think we just constantly, as a society, living in perpetual disappointment in ourselves.
And that disappointment causes a lot of anxiety. I say to clients always, you must compare apples with apples. If I walk into the gym and I see the guy running on the treadmill extremely fast, or he's got bigger biceps than what I have or whatever, then I think, I'm not good enough. But I don't realize there are many other people who didn't get to the gym today, or there's someone who's just struggling to get up the stairs at the gym, but I don't compare myself to them.
Yeah.
Because I look at the people that's always better than what I am, and I say, I'm not good enough. And I think as a society, we've grown up believing that we've always got to be better. And there's nothing wrong with it. But if I'm exhausting myself in the process, it's going to cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of other mental issues. That's not good. So when I accept myself for who I am, and I realize if I compare myself to other men my age, the average person, I may actually be above average. And then not to become complacent, I still want to achieve things, but I don't always have to just look at the 1% and say I've got to be like the 1%.
Yeah, because it's, okay, maybe I'll then be accepted if I am at the 1%. So I think there's 2 points there that I kind of want to, go and diverge to. So for me, myself, let's say, and it's also another example of how you can look at someone and then analyze. So you compare to, let's say, the person that you're driving and you see the person running and they look amazing and you can see they've been running for quite a while. They maybe have done 10Ks or whatever, and you think, flip, I never got to the gym. I never did this. But then you also don't know the sacrifices that that person is making to be able to go do that. So they might, that hour that they went for a run is the only time they could have spent with their kid. So now they're not with their child, they're running, but you look at them like, flip, that guy, he's running, he's healthy, he's fit, but then you don't know the negatives from it as well. So I think there's also that you don't know the cost. You don't know the cost that they are paying to be able to have that. I know personally to build, dedicating myself so much towards my business and my training has been to the detriment of my personal life and relationships, because I would prioritize work, prioritize training over being able to maybe go on dates or being able to see friends as often and connect with them. So there's payoff, or there's a trade-off to everything. Whatever you want in life, unfortunately, I think it's fortunate, because if everything was easy and you didn't have to make decisions, what would be valuable? So I think it is good, the fact that we have to make decisions to whatever direction we want, but you're going to pay the price to certain degrees.
There's a saying that says, whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And whenever you say no, you're saying yes to something else. And in that example of yours, you see the guy running and he runs well, and you're thinking, oh, I should be like him. But thinking about, he's actually sacrificing time with his children, or he's training for the comrades, which is amazing, but that means he can't get the promotion at work because he has to have X amount of hours per day on the road. And I think as a society, once I acknowledge that I'm actually doing okay, it makes things easier for me, and I get less worried and less anxious. As a psychologist, I bill per hour. So when my daughters were in primary school, they used to say to me, you know, Dad, other dads are home by 5 o'clock. And then one day, in tongue in cheek, I said to them, you can choose. I can be home by 5, but then we're never going to go on holiday. Or I can be home by 6:30 and we can go on holiday. And they say to me, go work until 8, it's okay. But it's all about asking yourself, if you're saying yes to this, if you're working longer hours, what are you sacrificing in the process? And if you are sacrificing something, what are you actually gaining out of it?
Yeah. And I think, and I've actually recently been seeing this girl, and she is like a typical, she's 27, so a typical girl that focused on the career and, you know, wanted to build something for herself, as opposed to being someone that would maybe rely on someone else so she can be independent. But then she said to me, her friend, I don't know if this is too personal, I might have to cut this out. but she said to me, her friend said, at what cost? You know, at what cost is it having your independence? At what cost is it having more money? Whereas, you know, then maybe you can't have a family. Then you can't have this. So to the cost of your family, yes, you can be independent. So it's, and then she's like, okay, well, I would actually rather have a family. So maybe I need to maybe go in a career path where I can have easier, more flexible hours, because that's actually what I want, not what maybe society has pushed me towards of 100% independence. Whereas, I mean, even as a single man, it's difficult to be 100% independent with the cost of inflation and all of these things. So for a woman, then even more so, you know?
And we've got, I know a person who after school went to study medicine, and she did her 5-7 years to become a GP, and then she wanted to specialize, and she specialized. And then at the age of 38, she was this medical specialist running her own practice, doing very well. And then she realized, but I don't have a relationship, I don't have children. Where at the age of 38 am I going to find a good mental, well-balanced man without too much baggage and start a family? And now it's 38. But she had achieved her career goals, but at what cost?
Yeah.
And we've always got to ask ourselves, that question there. And I think there are many people out there that's doing jobs that's paying a reasonable salary, but they're not necessarily happy in their jobs, but they're happy at home because that's part of the value system. There are many people that's loving their jobs and doing very well financially, but they're not so happy at home. So there's always a payoff. There's always a cost.
And I think social media, consumerism has painted this picture of, your job must be your life, and the consumerism aspect of, your whole identity must be rooted around being a business owner, because that's what's popular on social media is being the business owner. Then your identity becomes rooted in that, and by being a business owner, you then buy into consumerism by default. So it helps, if we had to go politically or whatever, it helps whatever agenda people are trying to push, because you're buying things, you're creating things for people to buy, you're paying more taxes, you're doing all of these things. So you're playing into the consumerism aspect. But then a fascinating interview with Rick Rubin I was watching, where he said, you don't have to have your biggest passion being your job. And I think with social media, you kind of think you have to, but you don't. Maybe that is just financing what you truly love. And yes, you do have to maybe spend more time doing what you don't like, the job, to then finance what you're truly passionate about. But that's just life, and life isn't going to be easy all the time, but you can still have a passion outside of the work. It doesn't have to be this massive business owner who posts all this business advice on social media.
I completely agree with you. And I think when you realize that your job may not be what you dreamt of doing when you were at school, and you're not always happy at work, I'm sure you can always look for something that you are happy at work. But if that is funding your other passions or giving you more time to do your other passions, why not? Mm-hmm. And it's coming back to the word balance again. Is everything in balance? Is when I'm burning the candle at both ends, when I am at work at 5 o'clock in the morning and coming back home at 9 at night and still carrying on working, that's out of balance. If I'm not doing anything, but I am spending a lot of time on my hobbies, I'm not going to have much money for my hobbies in 2 months' time. So it's all about balance, and I think that's where the whole thing of mental health comes in. And I always say for mental health, we need to go back to the basics. Am I sleeping enough? Am I eating healthily? Am I spending time with people that are filling my cup? Am I doing hobbies that I enjoy doing? Because if those things are out of balance, my life's going to be out of balance. It's like a car. If you've got one flat wheel, there are still 3 other wheels, but the car's not driving the way it should. So everything needs balance.
And then you continue driving on 3 wheels, that 4th wheel gets more damaged, and you damage yourself even further. Then making that correction is more difficult.
And I think the reason why it's difficult, one of the big reasons why it's difficult for people to make the corrections, is because my brain does not like change, because the path of least resistance. So if I've been doing the same thing over and over for 3 months, later on I don't even have to think about doing it anymore. But when I realize that's not healthy for me, it takes so much emotional and cognitive energy to think in a new way, to make different choices, and that makes it difficult, because now all of a sudden I've got to think differently to change things.
Yeah. In terms of the balance, and I'd love for you to even critique, because I wouldn't say my idea of balance, or what I know this isn't balance. I know that, but it's my form of balance. It's almost seasons. So, I've recently obviously expanded to where we are now in the studio. But before this, I would say like 3 weeks ago, or maybe like 8 weeks until 3 weeks ago, I've been training for running a lot more. So I was prioritizing a lot of running. Then I came into a season of, okay, We have to tailor back the amount of hours that we may be spending running. We need to focus more on business. Let's then focus more on business. I mentioned seeing that girl recently. So it's, okay, Jesse, you do need to have a bit more balance in this aspect. But now, I've been working because obviously she lives somewhere else. So we're not living together and that kind of stuff. I can work late in the day, but right now it's a little bit of training, tons of work, and then seeing her. Whereas previously it was lots of training, lots of business, and then seeing no one. But it was season. So now I've actually decided I was training for a race. It's on the 20th of July. But with this business coming up, I actually had to realize okay, that race can't actually be a priority. We need to tailor back the amount of hours and maybe put them somewhere else to even seeing her, growing this business. But then there will come a time where maybe I will tailor my life to a way where I can work a little bit less to train. So is that a good way of balancing it, or would it rather be, within a week period or a day period, you should have a bit of everything? Or, because for me, it's 80% of one thing for a few weeks, then, tailor that 80% back to a 50, then add other things in. But I think it also then boils down to all the health things that you mentioned.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that if you know what your goals are. If you set goals for yourself and you said, I want to run that race on the 20th of July, so working towards that, I need to put this in. But then also realizing, and as you've realized, is training for that race on the 20th of July, you're actually sacrificing something else. So if that's your goal, go for it. But then you've got to say to yourself, when that race is over, I need to pay attention to other areas of my life. But if you train for that race and you just finish that race and you enroll for the next race 3 weeks later and in December and next year, March, and you're constantly just training without realizing what you're sacrificing, it's not good for your mental health, and it becomes an imbalance. And I think all of us go through phases and seasons in our lives. And I think when you are younger, you've got much more energy and it's easier for you to put in 12, 14, 16 hours at work every day. And you might, in your career, go very far, but at what cost? So at a stage, you're going to get to the stage, and I'm there now where I'm thinking, well, if I carry on the way I'm carrying now, what's my legacy going to be? Are my children just going to remember me for, oh, that's my dad, he worked very hard? Or for my next X amount of years that I've left, how am I going to add value to society? So I can either carry on the way I'm carrying on, or I can make readjustments and say, okay, but this is what I want to be known for one day. So it's all about realizing the seasons you are in, and nature's an amazing teacher because it teaches us. There are times in winter where it looks like the trees aren't growing, but actually they are growing. But they also need that rest. So for summer to be able to be at the prime again. So we all need to ask ourselves, but what are my goals, and what am I going to do to achieve those goals? And when I've achieved that goal, not to say, okay, but this is not good enough, what's next? To say, okay, but I need to take time now just to recover or to rest or to focus on other areas of my life.
Yeah. And that rest then helps you be able to continue, so it's okay. You can go at 100, but then you're going to hit a wall and then you're going to be at 0, as opposed to maybe going at 80, then that time off and that 20% of off time then allows you to fire again at 100, and there's never really a point of 0. So I think that's definitely important. And also, if you, for me, if I had to say to you, or if I had to ask you, would you rather have another 10 million rand in your bank account, or would you rather have your youth back and be able to do things of more of a youthful person? Most people, if you ask a billionaire, would you rather have more money, or would you rather go back to being 28? Everyone's going to be like, I want to be able to have the energy I had at 28. I want to be able to experience things that I sacrificed because I was trying to build this business. And I think for the people watching this, because they may be like under 40, that's actually more important, is enjoy life, not in the nihilistic manner of, take in all the pleasures you can, but enjoy the small things like spending time with your parents, spending time with your brother, your sister, having that societal impact that you've mentioned, because that actually, I think, gives you more meaning, because the materialistic thing is fleeting instantly.
No, definitely. I mean, all we can take with ourselves the day that we die is our body, and that's only for 6 weeks. So I can't take anything with myself to the grave. So I like to be comfortable. I'd like to walk into a shop and think, okay, that looks nice, I can afford it, and then decide whether I want to buy it or not. But I've also got to ask myself, is that important? Is it important for me to wear the brand name clothing? Is it important for me to drive the smart car? And if that's important for you, go for it. But at what cost? I love my daughters and I love spending time with them. Maybe as teenagers, they don't always love me completely the same. No, I'm joking. But I was in a situation when I started working, started my practice, I would work until 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And then we fell pregnant and my eldest daughter was born. And it was just as all of a sudden my priorities changed. And I made the decision, I'm now only going to work until 6 at night so I can be home by 6:30 because I want to spend time with her. That means I'm sacrificing income. But that is because my values have changed and my values are different. And it's all about aligning to your values. You can have great goals, but if your goals aren't aligned to your values, you're very seldom going to achieve your goals.
And I think also that in terms of what you value, so maybe you value respect and you value appreciation and people giving you praise or those kind of things. So, okay, maybe it's not the car that is going to get you that. Maybe it's the family. So maybe your value of, I just want someone to love me and care for me and feel like I'm needed. So driving the BMW might get you that for a fleeting second, but having the family will give you that every single day.
I remember, I think I was 28, 29, when I had the opportunity to buy my first brand new car. It was a Toyota Corolla 1400. And I remember getting into it and I said to myself, this feels like a Merc. It's an amazing car. It's got electrical windows, power steering, aircon. But 3 weeks later, I got into the car and I thought, it's okay. And I think coming back to your point of what's important to me is, as a dad, my daughters are very important to me. But if I overparent them and I'm too involved in their life, that's also not balance. I want to spend quality time with them, and I've got to realize that I can give them advice. They won't always follow my advice, and that's okay. But it's about what's important to me.
And then what's important to them, because then it helps you parent them better. Whereas pushing too hard is going to make them push further away. So it's, yes, this is important to me, but what's important to me, if I just give myself over to feeling that importance, then they're going to push away, then I'm going to feel less of that importance. So I think it's also gauging how much of yourself to apply in that particular situation, because you're dealing with other humans who want different things to you.
Exactly. And to realize that, I mean, you told me you've got an older brother. Same mom, same dad, same house, but the two of you are different.
Completely different.
My daughter's 15 and 17. They are completely different. Same mom, same dad, same house. We raised them in a similar way, but they're completely different. So I realized with my one daughter, what's important to her is physical touch. So she loves the hugs. She loves when we are watching TV to sit close to you. My other daughter, what's important to her is words of affirmation. I can give her hugs and it actually irritates her. But to say to her, I'm proud of you, I see you for who you are, makes a world of difference. So when you start saying to yourselves you have to parent both children in the same way, it's also not healthy. And that's where you have to realize you have to be able to adjust and be adaptable according to not just with your children. Same with colleagues. Some colleagues want to be left alone so they can do their work, and other colleagues want you to take an interest in them and ask them how was their weekend. And others want to go out for the beer after the work, and others all they want to do is just go home and do nothing. And just to realize that when I'm working with people, everyone's different. And how I am on Monday is going to be different to how I am on Friday. So it makes human interaction very interesting but very challenging.
Yeah. That my camera died, so I'm just going to steal yours.
Go for it.
That's very close. Well, I don't want to go into a second hour because I can't afford you on the second hour. No, I'm joking. But yeah, I really do appreciate you coming. I think it was just over an hour. So yeah, I appreciate you coming through. I appreciate your perspective. And I definitely think, because if I look at my audience in terms of like the demographics, is 30 to 45-ish. And that's the age you start having kids, the time you start having to be a parent, having to be less selfish, and it's tough. I definitely think and I think that's also so I will push hard for the business, push hard to be the best physical shape I can be in, but all of that is actually selfish, and then you think I'm searching for meaning in building a business or having a physical achievement. But I think as humans, that we find more meaning through what we can give other people, or what we can experience from other people, or the impact we can have on other people. So building a business, yes, maybe I can employ a few people, but that's not the impact that you can have by having a family or having close friends, having a community. And I think that's more important than that selfish, what can I achieve? What can I do? I'm an island. I can do it all. Whereas then I think that purpose that people might be searching for, and I've found it myself, is you're not going to find purpose in that. Yes, you'll find purpose in the sense of having something to work towards, but that constant feeling of, okay, I'm loved or I'm cared for, or which I think is more primal actually as humans than the praise or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think the world gives us the message that the people that are the happiest are the people that are the most successful, and successful being the most money, the best car, the best address, the best clothes, materialistic stuff. But the happiest people are actually the people that are content. The person that may not have the most money, but they're happy within themselves. They've accepted themselves with their positive sides and their negative sides, and they're okay with that. The negative sides they try to improve on and be better, but they're not constantly waiting for the next dopamine hit to buy the next thing or to do the next thing. They're just content with who they are. And as you said earlier, you have to look at the seasons in your life. If you, what's shocking is I've got less time ahead of me than what I've had behind me. You hopefully have got more time ahead of you than what you've.
I'd like to think so.
got behind you, but that changes a person's priorities. I've got a family. You don't have a family, so you can work longer hours. There's nothing wrong with that. I have a family. I choose not to work such long hours because I want to spend time with them. So it's all about being content. And if we look at mindfulness and gratitude, just being grateful for what you have, because in every situation, even the most difficult situation, you can always find something that you are grateful for.
Yeah. And I think it's the great neutralizer is it doesn't matter where you were born, what race you are, what religion you have, how much money. Everyone has the ability right now to be content, to feel joy, to feel happiness, not in the sense of I'm trying to find happiness, but to feel I can actually be happy, or I'm deserving of happiness, or I'm okay not having X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't need that. And I think that's what's so cool about being a human is it doesn't matter about your job, your income, whatever. We all have the ability to be there and to reach that level of, I would say, almost consciousness.
Yeah, just being aware of what you can be grateful for, and not always being grateful for what you have, but being grateful for where you are at this stage. Just to be content. If I drive on the road and I see the very new, very fancy double cab back in, I'm thinking to myself, oh, Henny, one day when you're big. And then I feel I'm not good enough. But I don't drive along the road and see the person who's waiting for the taxi, because that's not in my frame of reference. But when I realize I've got a car, it may not be the best or the brand newest, but I've got a car. I've got so much to be grateful for.
For the purpose of a car, you've got more than enough.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Henny, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming out here, availing yourself, and definitely valued this conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. And cheers, guys. Thanks for watching.